Hi there, and thank you for joining us on the Overcomers Overcoming podcast. We feature those who are in the process of overcoming or have overcome any type of life encounter, life obstacle that at the time seemed to be almost insurmountable. With this podcast, we have three objectives in mind. Our first objective is we want you to know with a confident resolve you are not alone. We want to work with you. We want you to know there are others who are working with you, who want to help you through whatever you are encountering, and together we will get through whatever you're experiencing.
Our second objective is there are multiple options for any life encounter you are facing. We want to help you develop a resolve that there are various options and solutions to any life dilemma.
Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you're encountering something that was possibly a decision you made sometime in the past, and if you had the opportunity for a life redo, you would make a different decision. We want to help you with those critical thinking skills that can help you make an informed decision and not encounter what you're going through at the moment. We are the Cooper Culture, a veteran-owned business. We work with business personnel and families to develop and sustain connected relationship cultures within their families and organizations. That type organization is one where people feel wanted, appreciated, and genuinely a part of that organization. I'm with my wife and business partner, Marty, who is helping me facilitate this podcast. Today we feature Dana Diaz for our third episode, where we continue a conversation that is a result of a failed marriage, a bad childhood of being around a narcissist in her marriage and her parents. And she had to make some very difficult choices to get away from that kind of environment. But today we focus on stress and the cortisol that relates to that stress, what cortisol can do to our body, and Dana explains what it is that happened to her and the process she went through to learn and to make changes. It's a very dynamic podcast where we learn about stress, cortisol, and the adverse impacts on our body. Marty, what are some takeaways we can gain from Dana?
First of all, living with a narcissist is so hard. Anyone that abuses you is hard to live with. But with this and the cortisol that it affects in your body when you're going through all that the stress and the threat and whatever she was going through, she's very knowledgeable. Of course, she went through it and she still suffers from this. But the one thing that she said, she's working through it and she's doing better, but the cortisol gets used to, and I'm not sure how to explain it, wants you to continue to feed it, I'm going to say, for lack of better words. So she's very good. And if one in our audience or several in our audience are listening to this, Dana would be a great person to contact.
It's a great opportunity to learn about stress and the adverse impacts on our body. Let's listen and learn together. Dana, it is good to have you back with us for a second episode. For our listeners who might be listening for the first time with Dana, I want to encourage you to review the first episode and learn about what Dana went through, some of the life travails. But we're here more so, Dana, to learn from your life experiences, and it's today forward. Where we left off our first episode was you talked about stress and the impact that stress had on your life, more specifically cortisol. And we're not going to get into a real in-depth scientific explanation of cortisol, but Dana, our listeners are going to be very interested from your perspective. What is the effect of cortisol? And we sometimes just acknowledge stress without doing much about it. But talk to us, Dana, what you have learned about stress and cortisol.
Oh, it's a nasty, nasty thing, but thank you for letting me share. I went into this a little bit in my book about my former marriage, during which that 25 year, I can't talk. During that 25-year relationship, I did become very ill towards the end, and getting sick is actually what prompted me to finally leave the abusive situation. And it all came back to cortisol, which was brand new to me because I'd never heard of it. I'd heard of adrenaline. You know, we all know what that is, that rush to survive, you know, that you get that superhuman strength and all this good stuff that saves you from life-threatening situations. But when you're in an abusive situation, you are still living in what is perceived to be life-threatening. And in some cases, towards the end of my marriage, my life was threatened. And some people that experience domestic violence, unfortunately, are in the same situation where their safety, their security, all of that is threatened on a daily basis, and they're trying to save themselves and their kids. So instead of adrenaline, we have cortisol that runs through our body. I always say it's sort of a sister hormone to adrenaline. So cortisol is also released by the adrenal glands. But what it did to me, just to give people a little bit of an idea, I had been having about 2 dozen random symptoms. I mean, nothing seemed to relate to anything else. You know, usually if you have a sore throat and sniffles and a stuffy head, you know, you have a cold or strep throat or something. These were all different things. I was having heart palpitations. I couldn't go number two. I was having urinary frequency. My hands were going numb. I was blacking out. I mean, my muscles were stiffening, like rigor mortis stiffening after just sitting 10 minutes, which didn't make sense when I coached cross country and ran 5 miles every day. I was a healthy eater. None of these things made sense. And I was specifically also becoming very short of breath. But the most dramatic thing, and the thing that made me actually go to the doctor, was that within a 2-week period in November of 2018, I dropped almost 20 pounds for no reason. I was not fasting. I'm Catholic, but I was not fasting. It was not that time of year. I was not doing anything different in my exercising or my diet that would, you know, I mean, 20 pounds is not a safe weight to lose in 2 weeks. So at 93 skeletal pounds, it was scaring people when they saw me, because I mean, my face was hollow. I remember one night looking at my arms, and I mean, I could see every vein protruding like it was just gonna, you know, come out at me. I could see my muscles, and I mean, it was scary. It was jarring. Um, but it took one doctor after another. I started with my family doctor, who said, I don't know, maybe you just have anxiety. And, you know, going to next doctor after next doctor. It actually was a neurologist and a functional medicine doctor who figured out that it was the cortisol that was making me sick. Now, this is what cortisol did to me. Cortisol made me autoimmune because there was so much of it. It was running through me about 4 times higher than what it should in a normal person for decades, because I had come out of an abusive childhood and I was experiencing a lot of stress in my marriage. So for decades of this running through me, my white blood cells, those are the cells that fight off you know, cancers and viruses and nasty things your body gets, it was killing themselves off because there was so much cortisol. They thought they had to eradicate this thing in my body that shouldn't be there. So I became autoimmune. So all these random things I was experiencing were autoimmune reactions. But what was worse, although I don't know if it was necessarily worse, it was all fair game, I suppose, causing my body havoc, was that they realized that it also gave me a lung syndrome. Like, you can hear the scratchiness in my voice. I'm 48 years old. I've never once, not once, puffed anything in my mouth. No cigarette, no other stuff. Never smoked anything. And this raspiness comes from a lung disease called upper airway resistance syndrome that ironically is very much like COVID. When they came out with the COVID symptoms and said, if you have these things, you might have COVID. I'm like, well, I'll never know because that's my life every day. I have had a sore throat literally for about 5 or 6 years now, every single day. I struggle to breathe almost every day if I'm talking too much or if I'm exerting myself too much. COVID levels were 93% oxygen saturation and lower, and I have gone down to as low as 83%, where I can barely even stand up and everything gets dizzy and I have to lay down. But that's this upper airway resistance syndrome, which ironically is very common in victims of lifelong abuse. But it's not something too many doctors know about unless they work with trauma patients regularly. But it all stems from cortisol. So cortisol, when you're living in fear, when you're under, my doctors just said chronic stress caused it because they didn't know. As a victim of abuse, you don't openly tell people what's going on in your home. But the doctors said that all this chronic stress had caused this autoimmunity and this lung syndrome that I now have to live with the rest of my life. So I get a little insulted when people say, oh, just let go of the past. I can't. The past is holding on to me every day of my life. But what I can do is manage it. And I'm happy to say this, that since I divorced my ex-husband, this was at the end of the marriage, I was diagnosed. And since cutting ties with my mother and stepfather, who abused me as a child and throughout adulthood in different ways, I have become so much better. I have gained weight back. I am a healthy weight now. I am breathing better. I don't need to be on a backpack oxygen machine every single day like I had to for a couple years. I don't have all those random symptoms. So it's interesting that when you remove the sources of stress and those things that cause the cortisol to run through you, then, miraculously, you're better, physically. Like I said, I'll always have this, and day to day, there are certain symptoms that might come up if I'm under a little stress. They're certainly triggered by stress, but it's a very real thing. And what people really don't get about cortisol, and what I think I mentioned in the previous interview with you, was that it also plays into why people stay in abusive situations. Because cortisol, our bodies are very complex. And as I shared with you, I am no doctor and I'm not very good at science, but I've had to learn real quick to manage my own symptoms. But cortisol works with your nervous system, and the nervous system is a whole other thing. When you're a victim of abuse, your nervous system is so out of whack, because your nervous system, basically what it does is it takes you from, you're even keeled and normal, everything's fine, or you're experiencing joy or normalcy, to, oh my gosh, we were in a car accident, or, they say it's similar to like feeling like a lion is chasing you through the African desert. That's when your adrenaline starts going like, oh my gosh, I got to save myself. I got to survive. So that's when your sympathetic nervous system comes in and tries to get you back down, give you whatever your body needs you to get so that you can get back to that parasympathetic nervous system where you're just even keeled and everything's fine and it's normal everyday life. When you're in an abusive situation, you're always in that sympathetic state where your body's constantly trying to figure out how to calm you, how to soothe you. That's why it's dealing with the hypervigilance, the anxiety, the depression, the fear, all these things. And we lose the ability, because our systems are out of whack in that situation. We lose the ability because of the nervous system kicking in, the cortisol's kicking in, all these things are happening. So how do you ask somebody who's in this state of havoc to make a rational and intelligent decision to, oh, I'm afraid of my spouse every day, perhaps I should take my kids and leave? Doesn't occur to you. You're just trying to live. You're just trying to be. And I know most people have heard of these things called fight or flight, freeze or fawn. These are states of your body where the cortisol might jump in and where your nervous system, comes into play. Fight meaning you got to fight somebody, somebody is assaulting your child, you're going to jump in. You get that adrenaline rush, you're jumping in and fighting. The flight is when I like the flight mode personally. That's where I've lived in my life, is just like, I sense danger, I'm out of here. I sense tension, voices are raising, I'm out of here. I don't want any part of this because I know something's going to happen to me. And then you have freeze, where people become immobilized, and that has happened to me too. I actually talk about it in my book, how with my ex, there were times where, I could just see his face, a certain expression that cautioned me, and I would still my body unconsciously, like I wouldn't move like a rabbit. You know how they get real still, so they think, well, if this person doesn't see me, I'm not really here. My cat does that sometimes too, but I still see her. Um, she doesn't get away with much. She's right next to me. But that's the freeze. And then fawning, which we call it people pleasing, where somebody's always just appeasing to make sure everything's okay. Oh, you're serving this for dinner, even though I don't like that. That's fine. It's suddenly my favorite food. I love it. It's great. And I'm going to eat it all up. That's a light example, but that's the fawning, the appeasing. So all these things are working with our cortisol and with our nervous system, and they work to unfortunately keep us stuck in these situations because we aren't thinking rationally. Your body is not functioning like it's supposed to be. Your body's just working to try to get you back to that state of resetting and your state of calm, but it's just an influx.
Gosh, Dana, I'm fascinated with everything you said. And I'm thinking of the listener and myself that I'm guessing you went some number of years just kind of accepting the way things were because one, the family environment is we don't talk about
Yes.
it. And the other thing is you were experiencing 12, 15 different symptoms of what we now know to be stress, cortisol
Yes.
resultant stress. You may have just over some period of time just kind of accepted that well, hey, just live with it, get over it, whatever mental thought process you may have had. But I'm guessing, and here's maybe the source of my question: was it actually a blood test, and they looking at the white cells? Is that what caused a medical physician to say, "Hey, Dana, we need to look into a little bit further what this is"? I'm trying to get to kind of a cause and effect type thing that
Yeah.
may have been the turning point.
For me, it was a combination of things because I was being sent to this specialist and that specialist. I think they were trying to take my symptoms and deal with the symptoms as opposed to looking at the whole body as a system. That's where functional medicine came in. And a lot of people don't know what that is, but a functional medicine doctor is very hard to find and they're not covered by insurance. So they're really expensive, but they are the doctors that look at the whole of everything. They look at how everything interacts, because I went to the cardiologist and they did the tests and they found some issues and try this pill, try that pill, do this, do that, and the digestive doctor said the same thing. Well, here's a pill for that. I didn't need pills. I didn't need band-aids on my boo-boos. We needed to figure out what was wrong. And this is something that I have spoken to a lot of victims of abuse. And boy, let me tell you, this is actually a problem that we're finding that in regular medicine, your average doctor doesn't have any idea about the effect of trauma or cortisol on your body. They don't know anything. They don't teach them in medical school. One doctor said it's maybe a page or two or a chapter that he remembers about autoimmunity at all, and the nervous system. But, if you think about our anatomy, there's so much to learn in medical school, I suppose, unless it's your focus. But that's where people like me have a hard time. And that's where the diagnosis is so difficult to get to. I have, communicated with a few other victims of abuse who have similar symptoms and diagnoses that went through the same thing, years and years of one specialist after another until somebody finally figured it out. I just got lucky that a neurologist said, I know exactly what's wrong because I had a patient and he said this person is actually related to me, so I know more about it. And because I didn't speak about the abuse. And so they were just saying, is everything okay at home? And I was kind of like, well, it could be better, not the greatest, but I wasn't giving anything. But the cortisol test itself was actually very simple. They did notice from a blood test, it was just a complete blood count, which most doctors do once a year, where they saw the white blood cell count was just devastatingly low. It was dangerously low, they said. So that's when they kind of made the connection to the cortisol, because obviously I exhibited signs of anxiety and hypervigilance, and, kind of I always say it's like a cat with the ears back and the claws out and the hunched back. That's kind of how I always felt. I had to be on guard all the time. And so it occurred to the doctor, well, maybe we should try a cortisol test, because Lord knows I had every other test known to man up to that point. And all the cortisol test was, and this was done by Mayo Clinic, they send you 5 swabs, almost look like Q-tips, but you have to swab the inside of your mouth 5 times during a 24-hour period, and very specific times. There's even one time that you have to wake up in the middle of the night, because theoretically, that's where your lowest cortisol levels should be, because if you're sleeping, you're at peace, you're at rest, you should be at calm. And so when I sent those in to Mayo Clinic, they actually had me do a retest, because they said there's no way your cortisol levels are this high. We think we compromised the labs. So I had to do it again, sent it in, and they came back and said, okay, well, actually your results are that high. Your levels of cortisol should be anywhere between 100 and 600 to 700 on a really stressful, occasion, maybe something happening at work or a lot of pressure from your spouse or something happens to your kid. My levels were over 2,500 at all times of the day, including when I was sleeping. So, and they noticed that it was consistent too. They had run both tests. They had seen such high levels. Then they started asking the questions, what's causing you all this stress? Well, again, I wasn't divulging too much, but I trusted the one doctor enough to, let's just say, make comments and insinuations that led them to understand, things were not good at home at all. And that I was, the one doctor said, so you're basically living in fear. And I said, yeah, I am. And to give people context, at this point in my marriage, it did not start this way by any means, but at this point, after 20 some years, there were weapons involved. There were calls to cops being made. It was getting to where he actually told the neighbor he was planning to kill me. So there was a lot of fear. And again, logic would presume that I would leave, that I would walk out, but you're scared to even leave. You're scared what'll happen if they catch you leaving. You're scared to go see an attorney about filing for divorce, because if they find out, you may never see that attorney again, or anybody. You may never see daylight again. So there is a lot of fear. And this is something people need to understand. You can get your cortisol tests tested at home now. Now they make it readily available. And I know even us females, when we get to that stage of our lives where hormones come into play, well, cortisol is a hormone, and they do test that for you as well. So if it's a situation like, I know I was always worried, he was always tracking where I was going. If I was going to a female doctor, you're not going to get in trouble for that. You do have a female body. You can certainly go there and ask them if they would run a cortisol test, but I'm sure they would run one anyway. But that'll give you an indication, because you usually know. The first signs I remember, even as a child, were the migraines. Like, they were really bad headaches. I didn't know what a migraine was necessarily, and stomach aches, terrible stomach aches. I mean, like writhing in pain. And then I was always excessively hungry, and I didn't understand it, because I was such a tiny little thing. And, but I mean, nothing. I couldn't wait till noon when the lunch bell rang at school, because by then I usually had a headache because I was so hungry, because I had eaten breakfast at home at 7:30 or 8 in the morning. I mean, we're just talking about a few hours. It's not like I was being starved all day long. But that excessive hunger plays into this cortisol thing too, because cortisol, people will notice weight gain. Now, granted, I had other things going on, so I had a dramatic weight loss, but cortisol causes weight gain. It increases your blood sugar. It causes you imbalances with your insulin, so your body can't regulate the sugar. So now you have diabetes and you're gaining more weight. I mean, it can affect so many parts of your body. But the other really surprising thing that I learned about this cortisol is your body becomes addicted to it. And this is where we have these patterns where we see one generation after another, continuing, they say they're generational curses or generational trauma. That was certainly the case in my mom's side of the family. My grandma would always say, oh, we just always tend towards abusive men. Well, I don't know if it was so much a tendency as not only did we see it and experience it and think that was a normal relationship, and that's just how relationships were. I mean, I was often told, oh, he cheated on you. Well, that's what men do when they're married. They just do that. Keep your mouth shut, look the other way, move on. And that makes me sad, but I was told that, and I would never tell another woman that. But we also have this addiction to the cortisol where your body actually becomes so used to it going through at such high levels that when you're calm, when that fear is not existent, maybe you're having a great day, you got a promotion, or it's a holiday, you're enjoying, the peace and the joy and the happiness all around you. Your cortisol is like knocking on the door saying, excuse me, we're not getting our fix over here, kind of like an alcoholic needs a beer, or the drug addict needs that fix. It's the same thing. So we start getting antsy. Like, you can actually feel the anxiety in your body when you're calm. That's why a lot of people come to the point, when they're in my situation, and I've been there, where you're like, am I able to be calm? Because I'm always restless. My feet are always moving. Or my friends would always say, why can't you just sit down? I couldn't sit down. Even if I was standing, I was stepping back and forth, moving. I just kind of always had ants in my pants. It was that cortisol just begging for something. I needed conflict to feel normal. But nobody should live in that level of chaos. And what's worse is that this cortisol, this high cortisol, actually runs through a mother to a fetus. So if you are pregnant and in a situation where you are experiencing what we will call high stress and have all this cortisol running through you, now your baby is becoming addicted to that cortisol. So is it generational trauma because of, it's that nature versus nurture, because you're bringing them into the situation and they're made to think like, oh, this is just how, people are in relationships. This is just how these dynamics are. Or is it also that level of, I need this cortisol. I need to be in a relationship where I experience conflict in order to feel at some, for lack of better words, sense of peace and calm and normalcy. So it's really sad that our bodies work that way. They kind of work against us. But the good news is, like I said, if you are able to remove yourself from those toxic relationships and those situations, you can get better. I mean, I've certainly come so far. It takes a long time, though. Right before I came on this interview, I had somebody message me on social media and say, it's taken me over 2 years, but I think I feel calm today. And I said, well, good. It's taken me over 3 years to where I can sleep through the night. So, it takes time if you've been in an abusive situation for a while. But eventually your body, when it feels safe and calm, it will get you back to that reset level where we can function like all other people and be able to make more rational decisions and better choices for our futures.
Based on everything you've said to this point, I'm projecting there's possibly a listener who is saying, I am living in fear. I don't feel I can safely go to a doctor to get diagnosed or anything. I'm under the domination of him or her. But I do, as I'm listening to you, Dana, I am experiencing stuff, just various anomalies. And I just have things happening, but I'm just fearful that if I do anything, he, she might learn about this, and I may have to face the dilemma of what are you doing this, that, and the other. How
Mhm.
can a person get free of that domination? And there may not be, I mean, the answer to any person who's thinking this may be very customized, but in general, do you just have to find the moment to be alone, get out, and do whatever has to be done to find this maybe full medical physician or something? I know I'm asking you a lot of things, and there could be just a very expansive answer to this, but I'm trying to project in the form of the listener who's saying, based on what you're saying, Dana, I need help.
Absolutely. And it's actually not that difficult of an answer to comprehend, nor is it difficult for somebody to take the reins at home. The beauty of this, there's something that we say, or that I say at least a lot, is you can't heal in the environment where you got sick. So for me, I didn't understand this until I actually was removed, completely dissociated, cut contact altogether from my ex-husband after the divorce and from my mother and father, which was just a terrible mourning in itself because nobody ever wants to have to do that. But it was necessary for my mental and physical health because they are 100% related. And I am standing here attesting to the fact that once I always say it's like being in a garden, and I was this little flower in the soil that was filled with toxins and all this toxicity, and I had all these weeds around me sucking the nutrients out of the soil and preventing me from feeling the sunshine and feeling the rain and that nourishment. But these weeds, those toxic people, that toxic environment, once those weeds were gone, boy, I could feel the sunshine, and I opened up and I bloomed and I was good and I was feeling the rain on me and I was getting the nutrients from the soil. It's the same thing. So if you are not ready to remove yourself from your toxic situation, the situation or the people that are making you sick, I hate to say it, but it's the same advice. You can go on any website or ask any doctor, what do you do? It's the same thing that you do just to be generally healthy. Exercise, walk. 20 minutes of walking actually reduces your cortisol levels. Avoid sugar, caffeine, and processed meats. All three of those things increase your cortisol. You don't need any help, especially with the sugar, because cortisol completely puts your insulin out of whack and raises your blood sugar. Eating healthy foods, they say eating your greens, eating your vegetables, fruits are okay, but a lot of them are high sugar again, and you want to avoid the sugar. So a lot of vegetables. If you don't like salads, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not a big salad person, but you can find a way to stick lettuce in something, have a BLT or something. Just not with the processed bacon, buy organic and turkey bacon or something. But just these basic things that you do for any other part of your life where you want to be quote unquote healthy, it's the same thing, your diet and exercise. One of the first things my doctors said before I was, willing to remove myself, and get the divorce was to just eat organic. Just avoid foods with gluten and soy products. Soy, just, talk about something that causes damage to your hormones. Women should actually stay away from soy, but that's a whole other podcast for another day. But just watch what you're eating, watch how you take it. It's basically about taking care of yourself, of your body. And if you can take care of your body, your mind will follow, because all the chemicals running through your body will be as efficient as they can be in your situation. But certainly getting yourself out of the situation, if you can, is always, going to be the thing that's the game changer for you.
Again, Dana, as you said in the first podcast, what was very poignant to me then and again now, you must get away from the environment that is causing the situation. I want to address that comment in the context of faith-based people. There are many listeners who believe that, well, I don't believe in divorce. We're supposed to stay together and so forth. I do not believe there is any mandate that we stay with the person who is physically and or emotionally abusing us. I think we can separate for a period of time when the fundamental purpose of that separation is to make things right. And what I'm sensing, Dana, is that you had to separate from that situation. You had to change your eating styles. You just made a whole host of changes, but maybe the most fundamental of which was you must get away from the environment that was the source of all of that stress.
Yes, and thank you for bringing in the faith because, something that I'm not normally allowed to talk about is I was a very devout Catholic, and Catholics don't get divorced. You don't even think about getting divorced. You married him, you're going to stay with him, and that's that. No matter what happens, you stay. And that's the idea that was ingrained in my head. And that was one of the biggest factors for why I wouldn't leave, because I was so involved in my church. I had my son going to private Catholic school. I didn't want to risk the stigma. I mean, I've seen the movie Walk the Line how many times where, June Carter is stopped in the store and shamed for having gotten a divorce back then. I didn't want to endure that. I had enough shame of my own with my situation. I didn't want to have to deal with more of it. But it took me a long time. And honestly, getting sick was definitely the propellant, the motivator for me wanting out for good. There were a million other reasons that I had to leave that were even more valid, certainly. But my faith, I went to priest after priest, just wishing one of them could just say, God grants you permission. You can get divorced and it'll be okay. None of them would give me that because certainly I wasn't telling them everything, and certainly they don't want to promote divorce. But it took one, maybe it just struck me on the right day or something, but the one said to me, God doesn't want you to suffer, Dana. He doesn't want you to suffer. And he looked at me and he said, you've struggled so long, you've indicated to me you've even thought about ending your life. God put you here. He wanted you maybe to experience these things because he says, look, you have the gift of writing, you have the gift of speech. He even laughed at me and, about people tell me I talk too much, which I admit I do. But I said, maybe God gave me that big mouth for a reason because that's what the priest said. He said, God made you exactly how God wanted you. He made you exactly how you were supposed to be. And he said, and he meant for you to be here. And he says, I think he meant for you to have that childhood and meant for you to have that marriage and meant for you to be brave enough to take a stand for yourself so he could put you on the path you were always meant to be on. And I said, well, what's that? And he's said, well, what have you always wanted to do? I said, well, I went to school for journalism. I've always wanted to write something, anything, and I minored in psychology. I've always, since I was 12 years old, wanted to help victims of abuse. And he said, well, you have all these experiences, write a book, write a blog, go be a journalist, go travel the world like you want to travel. Go do these things. Maybe this is why God gave you those gifts. And I said, oh, so it's okay to have one mouth and 2 ears after all, because I'd always been told there's a reason I have 2 ears. I just don't use them both very well. So I say all this because I think I needed to have that conversation to feel like I had some man of God on my side giving me the permission to give myself the permission to live my life. And I am standing here today saying that I got divorced. The ground did not separate. The spawns of hell did not pull me down into them. I am still here. And I am still able to take communion at church. Nobody is questioning it. Nobody has judged me. Nobody has stigmatized me like I was so fearful of. If anything, I got a lot of, praise and joy. And can I tell you, the day after my divorce hearing, the church annulled my marriage as well because of the circumstances. I had no idea as a Catholic that you can get your marriage annulled after 25 years of being in that relationship, but they do in certain circumstances. And there was no hearing for that. There was no judge. I had to fill out a basic form and pay $40, and it was annulled. And I still have that letter saying that my marriage was annulled. I'd like to say I could pretend it didn't happen, but it did. And it's very much a part of who I am. And, I don't regret the past. I think it brought me exactly where I'm supposed to be, which is what I always wanted to do, which is what the priest said, which was to use my gifts, the gifts that God gave me specifically, and put me here to experience these things so that I could use them for good. And this is my service back to my Christian community, is that I'm here. I am still hanging on, and I am thriving, and it's a beautiful life after all that cortisol and everything, breathing issues and everything, but life is good. And it doesn't have to, your past does not have to define you. The things you do don't have to define you. You are who you are. God made you that way. Go thrive it, go be it, go spread that love in the world, however it is he meant for you to do it, and do it gladly, because that's where you will have peace in your heart, and peace with who you are, and peace with whatever you went through.
Dana, I just want to say thank you for sharing all of this. There are women out there, there are children out there that need to hear your podcast and encouragement. You can find someone to help you get out of a situation. So I just appreciate your testimony too.
Well, it's my pleasure. Like I said, I think that's what I was meant to do, and I'm doing it gladly. And I'm so appreciative that you all have had me on multiple times now, to help spread the word, because it's not always easy to get through to people who are in this situation. And, it is a scary thing. And I was there. I'll never forget saying I had a doctor's appointment just so I could talk to an attorney about potentially filing for divorce. And I sat and took the call in the medical center parking lot just in case he had followed me. I get it, but there's a better life waiting for everybody. You weren't meant to live in those circumstances.
Dana, I'm going to add my thank you as well, that I'm projecting there may have been a time in a former life where you were the proverbial doormat, so to speak, kicked and
Yes.
walked on and so forth. And Dana, I project you have the strength of resolve. Yep, the past is what it was, and yes, but you're talking and you're living today and forward. You too can overcome the past, and the past will never define you. It is a mindset, but you have a strength of resolve. And boy, Marty and I admire that in you. You have that strength of resolve, and you're moving forward. It is today and beyond, and everything about you is, the past is what it was. But from now on, it is what things are going to be. You're living that vibrant life, and you are here to pass forward and help others develop the courage to do whatever needs to be done. We do not have to be under the domination of, you've experienced the symptoms, and some of these are lifelong symptoms, but the good is, the best is yet to come, because Dana is there to reach out, help you. Dana, on behalf of our listeners, wow, thank you for, if I could say, in spite of what you've been through, you're making the very best of today and forward.
I'm trying. That's all I can do. And I hope other people will join me. And thank you so much again for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Tell us again the title of your book so our listeners know.
Sure. It's Gasping for Air, The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse. You can find it anywhere books are sold online, and it is in an ebook format on Amazon. So if you don't feel comfortable having a book that has abuse in the title sitting on the coffee table, get it on your Kindle or on your phone, wherever you can read an ebook from.
That was very insightful for you to have that thought. And
Thank
Dana, Again, we will make your book available by noting it in the narrative to this podcast so that listeners can know exactly what the book title is, how to get it. And thank you for everything that you have experienced, but more so that you are passing forward what you've learned, your strength of resolve. Thank you for everything that you represent to help others.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate having the opportunity to share our and our guests' life's experiences with you.
The Cooper culture advances organizations to achieve and sustain high retention rates, connected communication, and trust through personality insights and principled leadership. You can contact us at our website, thecooperculture.com, and you can contact us directly at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at thecooperculture.com. We work with you to help assess aspects of your culture to advance the environment and people to their best performance. We do that through our staff of certified personal performance coaches, leadership trainers, keynote speakers, and DISC personality behavior experts. You can book a speaking engagement directly through our website by contacting us at ron@thecooperculture.com. We look forward to sharing our life experiences with you, some of which are profound, some of which are pretty funny. Some of those life experiences are ones we'll never do that again because we've been through stuff. We truly look forward to working with you, speaking with you, helping advance you in any way that we can.